The fake wedding plan. The great halls of the Alari Palace shone with golden light. Thousands of alien nobles watched in silence as Jake Carter stood beside Princess Syria. His heart pounded. He never thought he would be here, on an alien world, about to marry an alien princess. But this was not a real marriage. It was a deal. The Alari and the Cathar were at war. Millions had already died. Earth had sent Jake, a skilled diplomat, to stop the war. The only way to bring peace was this marriage, a symbol of unity between the two alien races. Jake's hands were sweaty. Syria was beautiful, with silver hair and glowing blue eyes. She looked calm, but he could see something in her eyes. Worry? Fear? He wasn't sure. The Alari priest raised his hands. By the sacred laws of the Alari, this union is sealed. Jake felt a cold metal bracelet snap around his wrist. Alari marriage bands. He glanced at Syria. She gave him a small, unreadable smile. The crowd erupted in cheers, but before Jake could take a breath, Syria gripped his hand tightly. "You must never leave my side," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but there was something firm in it. Something serious. Jake frowned. "Relax, princess. We did it. The war is over." Syria's grip tightened. "You don't understand. This marriage, it's real. The bond is real." Jake's stomach dropped. "What?" Before she could explain, a loud explosion shook the palace. The golden walls trembled, and screams filled the air. Guards rushed forward, weapons drawn. The sky outside turned red as enemy ships broke through the Alari defense. Jake turned to Syria. "What's happening?" She looked at him with wide, desperate eyes. "The Cathar. They're here. They want you." Jake's blood turned cold. A deep voice echoed through the palace. "Bring me the human." Jake turned. At the entrance of the great hall stood a massive figure in black armor, a Cathar warrior. Behind him, more soldiers stormed in, cutting down Alari guards. Jake had no weapon, no plan. He wasn't a soldier. He was just a diplomat. Syria grabbed his arm. "Come with me. Now." She pulled him through a hidden doorway behind the wedding altar. They ran down a dark corridor as explosions rocked the palace above. Jake gasped for breath. "What did you mean?" "The bond is real." Syria kept running. Alari marriages are not just a ceremony. The bracelet. It's a soul link. You and I are connected now. Jake's head spun. Connected? How? Syria stopped and placed a hand on his chest. Jake suddenly felt something strange. Her heartbeat. Inside his chest. He gasped. "You feel it now, don't you?" she whispered. Jake shook his head in disbelief. You planned this." Syria's eyes filled with sadness. "I had no choice. The only way to awaken the ancient defenses of Alari was through a soul link. And now, the Cathar know." Jake felt anger rise in his chest. "So I'm not just some fake husband. I'm your key to winning this war." Syria lowered her head. "I never wanted to trap you. But if you leave me now, Alari will fall. And Earth will be next." Before Jake could answer, a deep growl echoed behind them. A Cathar warrior stood at the end of the corridor, his red eyes glowing in the darkness. He lifted a plasma rifle and aimed at Jake. Jake's heart stopped. Syria raised her hands, and a bright blue shield formed in front of them. The plasma bolt hit the shield, sending sparks flying. Syria's body trembled. "I can't hold it for long. Run." Jake clenched his fists. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a hero. But right now, he had no choice. He grabbed Syria's hand and ran into the darkness, knowing that his life had just changed forever. The hidden truth. The air in the underground tunnels was damp and cold. Jake Carter's heart raced as he and Princess Syria ran through the labyrinth beneath the palace. Their footsteps echoed against the stone walls, chased by the distant growls of Cathar warriors. The faint hum of Syria's protective shield crackled around them. flickering as her strength faltered. Jake's mind swirled with confusion and fear. He had come to this alien world as a diplomat, with a simple mission: to marry an alien princess as a symbol of peace and unity, a fake marriage to stop a war. But now he was running for his life, soul-bound to Syria, through a mysterious alien connection. He clenched his fists, glancing at the metal bracelet on his wrist. The Aelari marriage band shimmered faintly in the dim light. He swore he could feel it pulsing. The soul link is real. I'm connected to her. Ahead, Syria stumbled. Jake caught her before she fell. Her face was pale, and beads of sweat glistened on her brow. I can't hold the shield much longer, she whispered. Jake tightened his grip. We'll find somewhere safe. Just stay with me. The ground trembled again as another explosion shook the palace above. Dust rained from the ceiling. They turned a corner and found themselves in a circular chamber with walls covered in glowing symbols. Syria leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. The blue glow of her shield flickered out. Jake stood beside her, scanning the chamber. Where are we? Syria's eyes moved to the glowing symbols. The Hall of Ancestors. This place was built thousands of years ago to guard the secrets of the starcore. Jake froze. The starcore. The thing the Cathar are after. Syria nodded, fear deepening the lines around her eyes. Yes, the starcore is an ancient energy core. It powers the Aelari planetary defense system. Without it, our world is defenseless. Jake ran a hand through his hair. Let me guess. They need us, this soul link, to activate it. Syria lowered her gaze. Yes, only a bonded royal couple can access the starcore's core command. Jake paced the chamber. So they never wanted me, the human diplomat. They wanted me, the alien prince you tricked into marriage. He stopped and looked at her. Why didn't you tell me? Tears glistened in Syria's eyes. Because you would have refused. We were out of time. The Cathar had already infiltrated our defenses. If I didn't bond with you, the starcore would stay dormant, and my people would fall. Jake exhaled slowly. The betrayal stung, but the fear of the situation was stronger. What happens if they get the starcore? The Cathar will have control over our planetary defense systems. They can destroy Aelari Prime with a single command. Syria's voice trembled. And Earth is next. Once they have that power, they'll come for your world. Jake's stomach turned. Earth had only recently joined the galactic community. Humanity thought they were safe, negotiating peace between alien empires. They never imagined they could become targets. A deep growl echoed from the corridor behind them. Jake whipped around. Shadows moved at the tunnel entrance. The Cathar are here, Syria said, pushing herself away from the wall. Jake's eyes scanned the chamber. There's got to be a way out. Syria pointed to a pattern of glowing symbols near the far wall. That sigil, the one shaped like a spiral. It opens a hidden passage. Jake sprinted across the room, pressing his palm against the spiral. The wall shifted with a low rumble, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Go, Jake shouted. Syria ran toward him just as the first Cathar warrior entered the chamber. The creature was massive, 8 feet tall, with thick black armor and glowing red eyes. It roared, raising a plasma rifle. Syria threw up her hands, summoning a weak blue shield. The plasma bolt hit the shield and exploded. The force threw Syria against the wall. She collapsed with a pained cry. Jake charged the Cathar without thinking. He tackled the alien's legs, knocking it off balance. The creature slammed an armored fist into Jake's side. Pain exploded through his ribs. The Cathar grabbed Jake by the throat, lifting him off the ground. Its breath was hot and metallic. Human, it growled, you cannot protect the princess forever. We will have the starcore, and we will burn your world. Jake gasped for air. The metal bracelet on his wrist heated against his skin. Suddenly, Syria's voice echoed in his mind. Focus on me. Trust the bond. Jake's vision blurred. He focused on Syria, who lay across the chamber, her eyes locked on his. The bracelet's heat intensified. The Cathar's grip loosened as a surge of blue energy shot from Jake's arm. The energy blasted the Cathar across the room. Jake dropped to the floor, coughing. Syria struggled to her feet and limped toward him. "Come on," she whispered, pulling him toward the staircase. They stumbled down the dark steps. The wall closed behind them, cutting off the Cathar's enraged roars. They sat on the stone steps, gasping for breath. Jake rubbed his wrist. The metal band was glowing faintly. "What the hell was that?" Jake asked. Syria looked at the bracelet. "The soul link. It's growing stronger. The bond connects us now. Our minds, our energy. If we work together, we can control it." Jake leaned his head against the cold wall. "And if we don't? Then the Cathar will find us, and the starcore will fall into their hands." The silence between them grew heavy. The reality was clear. They were no longer running from a political crisis. They were fighting for two worlds. Jake closed his eyes and whispered, "What do we do next?" Syria's voice was soft but determined. "We go to the temple of the starcore before the Cathar do. And we stop them." Jake opened his eyes and met hers. The fear was still there, but now it was joined by something else. Resolve. They had no choice. The war wasn't over. It had only just begun. The Cathar conspiracy. The air in the hidden stairway grew colder with each step. The ancient stone walls whispered with unseen energy, and the faint glow of the soul-link bands cast eerie blue shadows. Jake Carter kept one hand against the wall to steady himself, the other gripping Princess Syria's arm as they descended deeper into the planet's core. His chest ached from the Cathar warrior's strike, and every breath came with a sharp sting. "How deep does this go?" Jake asked, his voice echoing in the vast emptiness. "The ancestors built this labyrinth to protect the starcore," Syria said, her voice hushed. "No one has entered these tunnels in centuries." The silence between them hung heavy. Jake's mind raced with unanswered questions. The Cathar wanted the starcore, an ancient power that could destroy planets. Syria had bonded their minds with the soul link to activate it, unknowingly making Jake the key. And now, both of their worlds were in danger. He rubbed the glowing bracelet on his wrist. The metal was warm, and beneath the surface, he felt something alive, like static brushing his skin. "Focus on me. Trust the bond." Syria's whispered words from earlier returned to his mind. He hadn't imagined it. Through the soul link, they shared more than thoughts. They shared instincts, emotions, maybe even power. But could he really trust her after she had tricked him into this? The stairway ended at a thick stone door covered in glowing symbols. Syria placed her hand on the center spiral. The symbols shifted like water, and the door groaned open, revealing a vast chamber bathed in blue light. Jake stepped in behind her, his eyes widening. The walls were etched with countless alien symbols swirling like constellations. In the center of the room stood a large pedestal, carved from obsidian-like stone. Floating above it was a crystalline orb, pulsing faintly. "The starcore's echo," Syria whispered, "a projection of its location." Jake pointed to the orb. "So the real starcore is where?" Syria studied the shifting symbols within the crystal. Her eyes narrowed. "The Temple of Evernight. It lies beneath the old capital." She hesitated. "But we can't go directly there." "The Cathar know that now." "How?" Jake asked. Syria turned, her expression dark. "They were waiting for us in the palace tunnels. They knew about the soul link, about you, which means someone within the royal court betrayed us." Jake's jaw tightened, an Aelari working with the Cathar. "Why?" "Power," Syria said bitterly. "The starcore can do more than protect a planet. With the right sequence, it can turn into a weapon that could wipe out entire fleets." Jake ran a hand through his hair. "A planet killer. And we're the keys. Exactly. Syria's gaze hardened, which is why we need to reach the temple before they do. A low metallic thud echoed from the corridor behind them. Jake's body tensed. He met Syria's eyes. They found us, she whispered. The door behind them groaned as something massive pounded against it. Dust fell from the ceiling with each strike. Jake scanned the chamber. There has to be another way out. Over there, Syria pointed to a narrow archway on the far side of the room. The pounding grew louder. The thick stone door splintered under the force of each impact. Go, Jake shouted, grabbing her wrist. They sprinted across the chamber, the floating crystal behind them humming with increasing intensity. Syria skidded to a halt at the archway, placing her hand on the glowing symbol beside it. The stone shimmered and slid open just as the main door shattered. Jake risked a glance back. A Cathar commander stepped through the broken doorway. The creature was taller than the others, nearly 9 feet, with jagged black armor that gleamed like obsidian. Its crimson eyes locked onto Jake. Run, Syria shouted, pulling him through the archway. The door slid shut behind them. The corridor beyond was narrow and steep, spiraling downward. They ran without stopping, their breaths sharp and uneven. The soul link thrummed with shared fear and urgency. The tunnel opened onto a hidden dock carved into the rock. A sleek, silver transport hovered silently above a magnetic platform. My father used this ship to escape during the uprising, Syria explained as they ran to the entrance. She pressed her hand to the scanner, and the hatch hissed open. They climbed inside, collapsing into the control seats. Syria activated the engines, and the ship shot through a concealed tunnel. Jake sagged against the seat, his chest heaving. "Where are we headed?" he asked. "The city of Talvera," Syria said. "The Cathar won't expect us to go there." Jake rubbed his eyes. "Why Talvera?" "Because that's where the old archives are," Syria said. "The starcore can only be activated with a specific command sequence. If the Cathar don't have that sequence, they can't use it." Jake's mind was a storm of questions, but exhaustion won. The vibrations of the ship lulled him into a restless sleep. He woke to Syria's voice. "Jake, look." Outside the window, Talvera sprawled across the desert plain, its crystal towers glowing beneath twin suns. But smoke billowed from the city center. "They've already been here," Jake said, heart sinking. The ship touched down near the central archive. The streets were eerily silent. Buildings smoldered, and the faint metallic scent of plasma burns lingered in the air. Syria knelt beside a fallen guard, pressing 2 fingers to his neck. Her face tightened. Dead. Plasma weapon. Footsteps echoed from the far end of the plaza. Jake ducked behind a fallen column, pulling Syria with him. 2 Cathar soldiers marched past, speaking in guttural tones. Jake strained to hear. "The general will activate the starcore tonight," one said. "And the humans?" the other asked. "The bonded pair is still at large," the first soldier replied. "But the traitor will deliver them soon enough." Jake exchanged a look with Syria. "The traitor? Someone close to you sold us out," Jake whispered. Syria's jaw clenched. "I think I know who it is." Jake's stomach twisted. "Who?" "Lord Kale," she said, voice trembling with anger. "My father's most trusted advisor." Jake's mind raced. If he's working with the Cathar, he'll know we'll come for the starcore. Syria gripped his hand. The soul link flared, and Jake felt her desperation and determination. "We need to get to the Temple of Evernight," she said, "and we need to stop Lord Kale before he hands the command codes to the Cathar." Jake nodded. The mission was no longer just about survival. The Cathar wanted the starcore to destroy worlds, and Lord Kale had betrayed them all. "Let's end this," Jake said. The soul link pulsed with shared resolve. They sprinted back to the ship, knowing the battle for the starcore had just begun. The betrayal. The transport ship sliced through the desert sky, leaving behind the smoldering ruins of Talvera. Jake Carter sat stiffly in the co-pilot's chair, his mind a tangle of questions and dread. The Soul Link bracelet on his wrist pulsed faintly, mirroring his anxiety. Across from him, Princess Syria piloted the craft, her eyes locked on the horizon where the twin suns cast long shadows over the endless dunes. Jake glanced at her. "You're sure it's Lord Kal?" Syria's jaw tightened. "I'm certain. He was always close to my father, but after the war with the Cathar began, he grew more ambitious. He spoke of power and survival at any cost. I dismissed it as fear." She shook her head. "I should have seen it earlier." Jake rubbed his wrist. "And now he's helping the Cathar get the starcore." Syria didn't answer, but the slight tremble of the Soul Link told Jake everything he needed to know. The bond was getting stronger. He could feel her emotions without words, her anger, guilt, and beneath it all, fear. He sat forward. "How much time do we have before the Cathar get to the starcore? If they already attacked Talvera, it means they found part of the command sequence. But they need us to activate the core fully," Syria said. "The Soul Link is the final key." "Great," Jake muttered. "We're flying straight into a trap." "We don't have a choice," Syria replied. "If the starcore goes online under their control, Alari Prime will be destroyed, and Earth won't be far behind." The ship's navigation panel blinked. Syria tapped the controls, and a holographic map appeared. The Temple of Evernight glowed like a faint beacon in the desert. It was hidden deep within the Valley of Shadows, a place untouched for centuries. Jake studied the map. "Looks like a death trap." Syria gave a humorless smile. "It was designed to be. Only the soul-bound can enter safely. For anyone else, the temple's defenses will react." The word hung heavy between them. Jake imagined ancient alien defenses springing to life. Energy turrets, plasma mines, maybe worse. A sharp beep from the console broke the silence. "Proximity alert," Syria said, fingers dancing over the controls. The display shifted to show 3 Cathar fighters closing in from behind. "They found us," Jake said, his pulse spiking. Syria gripped the controls. "Hold on." The ship veered sharply, diving toward the desert floor. Plasma blasts streaked past the windows, leaving glowing trails. The Cathar fighters accelerated, their sleek black frames cutting through the sky like predatory birds. "Do we have weapons?" Jake shouted. "Minimal," Syria said, flipping switches. Twin plasma cannons deployed from beneath the hull. She fired, and blue bolts shot toward their pursuers. One Cathar ship exploded, but the others dodged and returned fire. The ship rocked as plasma struck the rear thrusters. Warning lights blared. "Engine damage," Syria said. "We won't outrun them." Jake's eyes scanned the desert below. A jagged canyon stretched beneath them. "There, take us into that canyon." Syria didn't hesitate. The transport dipped low, skimming the canyon floor. The Cathar ships followed, plasma bolts chewing into the rocky walls. Syria weaved through narrow passages while Jake fired the cannons. A plasma blast struck the left engine with a deafening crack. The ship spiraled, crashing through rock spires before slamming into the canyon floor in a cloud of sand and metal. Jake's vision blurred. Pain throbbed in his side. Syria groaned beside him, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. "Syria," Jake rasped. She opened her eyes. "I'm okay." The sound of approaching engines echoed down the canyon. Jake unbuckled his harness and helped Syria from her seat. They climbed out of the shattered cockpit, their boots sinking into hot sand. The Cathar ships landed at the canyon rim. Figures in dark armor disembarked, their crimson eyes glowing through the dust. "We need to hide," Jake said, scanning the terrain. He spotted a crevice in the canyon wall. "There." They scrambled toward the opening, ducking inside just as plasma bolts rained down. The crevice led to a narrow tunnel that twisted deep into the rock. They ran, guided only by instinct and the faint pull of the Soul Link. The tunnel opened into a cavern with a smooth metallic surface. "This is old tech," Jake whispered, running a hand along the wall. Aelari. Syria nodded. We must be near the temple. A sharp metallic voice echoed from behind them. Not near. You're exactly where we want you. Jake turned, his stomach plummeting. Lord Kale stepped into the cavern, flanked by Cathar soldiers. His pale silver hair gleamed under the dim light, and his eyes held a cold, satisfied glint. Kale, Syria spat. You betrayed us. Kale smiled faintly. Betrayed you? No, princess. I saved us. The Aelari have grown weak with peace. The starcore will give us power to rival any empire. By handing it to the Cathar, Jake demanded. Kel's gaze shifted to Jake. Ah, the human. The diplomat who became a pawn. You have no idea what you've been dragged into, do you? Jake clenched his fists. I know you're selling out your people for power. Kale laughed softly. You think this is about power? No, Earthman. This is about survival. The Cathar promised peace if we give them the starcore. They'll destroy Earth, yes, but they'll leave Aelari Prime intact. Jake's heart stopped. You sold out Earth to save yourselves. Survival requires sacrifice, Kale said. His eyes shifted to Syria. And now, princess, you will complete the bond with the starcore. Activate it, or the Cathar will execute your husband. The Cathar commander stepped forward, aiming a plasma rifle at Jake's chest. Syria's breath hitched. The soul link trembled with her anguish. Don't do it, Jake said through clenched teeth. Don't give them the starcore. Kale smiled. She won't let you die, Earthman. The bond makes your pain her pain. The moment we apply pressure, she will break. Jake met Syria's gaze. The link flared, and he sent her a single message through the bond. Trust me. Syria's eyes widened. Jake felt her fear, but also her understanding. Kale gestured to the Cathar commander. Make the human scream. The commander struck Jake across the face. Pain exploded through his jaw, echoed in Syria's gasp. The link intensified, crackling like live electricity. Enough, Syria cried. I'll do it. I'll activate the starcore. Cal's smile widened. Wise choice. Syria stepped toward the pedestal at the center of the cavern. Her hand hovered over a glowing spiral symbol. Jake sagged in the soldier's grip, blood trickling down his chin. Syria's fingers brushed the spiral. The cavern vibrated. Symbols ignited across the walls. The starcore's echo appeared again, brighter than before. Kale stepped closer. Now, princess, speak the command words. Syria's lips parted. Her voice resonated through the chamber. By the bond of light, by the unity of souls, awaken. The symbols shifted, forming a glowing map of the planet. A deep hum filled the air as the starcore's true location was revealed. Beneath the obsidian spire, Cal's eyes gleamed with triumph. Perfect. Now, kill them both. The Cathar commander raised his rifle. Syria, Jake shouted. She spun and hurled out her hands. The soul link surged with a blinding blue light. The force struck the Cathar soldiers, sending them crashing into the walls. Kale staggered backward, shielding his eyes. Jake lunged at the commander, knocking the rifle aside and landing a hard punch to the alien's throat. The soldier collapsed. Syria swayed, the energy drain weakening her. Jake caught her before she fell. Kale retreated toward a side tunnel. This isn't over, he snarled. The Cathar will have the starcore. He vanished into the shadows. Jake held Syria close as the cavern's light dimmed. Her breath was shallow, and the bond trembled with exhaustion. He stroked her hair. Stay with me, princess. We're not done yet. She opened her eyes, weak but determined. We have to stop them. At the obsidian spire. Jake's jaw tightened. Then we go there, he said. And this time, we end it. The escape. The cavern trembled beneath their feet as Jake Carter cradled Syria against him. Her breathing was shallow, her strength drained after unleashing the Soul Link's raw energy. The faint blue glow of the ancient symbols on the walls flickered like a dying flame. "Syria, stay with me," Jake whispered, tapping her cheek gently. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused. The Soul Link bracelet on his wrist pulsed in time with her weak heartbeat. Through the bond, Jake felt her exhaustion, like a candle flickering in a storm. "We don't have time for this." Jake scanned the chamber. The Cathar soldiers lay motionless against the walls, their armor scorched from Syria's energy blast. But Lord Kale had escaped, and the Cathar still knew the location of the starcore, the obsidian spire. He cursed under his breath. If the Cathar reached the starcore first, they'd harness its ancient energy to destroy Elari Prime. And then Earth. Jake tightened his grip on Syria. "We need to move." Her head lolled against his chest. Through the link, Jake sensed her fragile consciousness. He shifted her weight onto his shoulder, standing with a groan. His ribs screamed in protest, but he pushed the pain aside. The narrow side tunnel Kale had fled through stretched into darkness. Jake limped toward it, every step a battle against gravity. The faint hum of energy still resonated through the walls, like a heartbeat deep beneath the stone. As they moved, the Soul Link began to shift. Jake had grown used to sensing Syria's surface emotions: fear, determination, pain. But now something else stirred in the bond. Visions, faint but vivid. He saw twin suns setting over a crystalline city, the warmth of a father's hand on a child's shoulder. Syria's memories. The bond is growing stronger, Jake realized. We're no longer just sharing emotions. The tunnel sloped upward. Jake's steps quickened. Syria stirred, murmuring softly. "Kale, he'll open the gate," she whispered. "We won't let him," Jake said through clenched teeth. The tunnel ended at a rusted metal ladder. Jake shifted Syria onto his back and climbed. His muscles burned, and the cold metal bit into his palms, but he climbed without stopping. At the top, a hatch blocked their path. Jake shoved it open with his shoulder. The hatch gave way with a screech, and sunlight poured through the opening. They emerged into a desert plateau. The hot wind stung Jake's face as he scanned the horizon. To the north, dark mountains rose against the pale sky. In their midst stood a jagged black tower, the obsidian spire. Its surface shimmered with faint energy lines, like veins beneath glass. "The spire," Jake muttered. Syria stirred again. They'll use the blood command," she whispered. "What's that?" Jake asked, lowering her to the ground. She tried to sit up, her face pale. "The starcore is sealed behind ancient wards. Only royal blood can open the core chamber. Kale knows this." Her eyes met Jake's. "They need me alive. The Soul Link was only the first step. The blood command is the final key." Jake's gut twisted. "So they'll capture you, or kill you to use your blood." Syria gave a weak nod. "Exactly." Jake stood and scanned the plateau again. The transport ship they'd crashed was far behind them, and the Cathar were likely regrouping. They needed transportation, and quickly. His eyes landed on a ridge where a sleek black craft was parked. Cathar design. "Stay here," Jake said. "I'll get us a ride." Syria tried to object, but exhaustion weighed her down. The Soul Link trembled with her fear as Jake moved away. He crouched low, approaching the craft. Two Cathar soldiers stood near the vessel, speaking in guttural tones. Jake picked up a rock and flung it toward the opposite side of the plateau. It clattered against the stones. The soldiers turned, weapons raised. Jake lunged. He tackled the first Cathar, driving his knee into the alien's throat. The second soldier swung its rifle, but Jake ducked, grabbed the barrel, and twisted. The plasma rifle discharged into the air. Jake rammed his elbow into the soldier's jaw, sending it sprawling. He grabbed the rifle and fired. The blast struck the soldier's chest, knocking it lifeless to the ground. Jake raced to the craft and activated the controls. The ship hummed to life with a sharp metallic whine. He sprinted back to Syria, lifted her into his arms, and carried her to the waiting craft. She groaned as he strapped her into the seat beside him. The controls were alien, but the interface resembled other tech he'd seen during diplomatic missions. He pressed what looked like an activation signal, and the craft rose smoothly into the air. Heading straight for the spire, Jake muttered, angling the ship toward the distant tower. Syria stirred beside him. Her hand brushed against his. The bond. It's getting stronger. Jake didn't answer, but he felt it too. Her emotions, her thoughts, they were no longer distant echoes. They were clear, sharp, like his own. He focused on the spire ahead. Its surface shimmered as they approached, revealing swirling patterns etched into the dark material. Suddenly, alarms blared. The Cathar had detected their stolen craft. Plasma turrets emerged from the spire's base and fired. Jake swerved. The craft spiraled through the air as plasma blasts streaked past. He pushed the engines to their limit, weaving through the fire. "Hold on," he shouted as the ship hurtled toward the spire's central courtyard. The craft slammed into the stone floor with a deafening crash. Jake's head struck the control panel. Pain exploded behind his eyes. He forced himself upright and unbuckled Syria. Blood trickled from a cut on her forehead, but she was breathing. The courtyard was a maze of black stone and glowing blue veins. In the center, a massive stone archway led into the tower's core. 2 Cathar guards stood before it. "Stay down," Jake whispered to Syria. He grabbed the plasma rifle from the wreckage, crouched low, and moved toward the guards. Through the soul link, he felt Syria's awareness sharpening, her fear giving way to determination. The guards shifted their weapons as Jake fired. The first guard fell instantly. The second turned and fired back, forcing Jake to dive behind a pillar. The Cathar soldier advanced. Jake ducked out and fired, hitting the enemy's knee. The guard roared and collapsed. Jake ran forward and slammed the rifle butt into the soldier's skull. He knelt by the archway and studied the controls. Strange symbols pulsed along the edge. The bond thrummed with Syria's insight. "The starburst signal. Press it," came her voice in his mind. Jake obeyed. The archway vibrated, and the stone parted with a deep, resonant groan. He rushed back to Syria and lifted her. Together, they crossed into the spire's core. The air inside crackled with energy. The walls glowed with shifting constellations, and in the center of the chamber floated the starcore, a crystalline sphere the size of a car, pulsing with blue and white light. Opposite them, standing with a blood-red dagger in hand, was Lord Kale. "You're too late," Kale sneered. Beside him stood the Cathar general, towering and motionless. Kale raised the dagger. "The blood command requires royal sacrifice." He pointed the blade toward Syria. "Shall we begin?" The Cathar general raised a plasma cannon and fired. Jake dove, shielding Syria with his body, as the plasma blast streaked toward them. The starcore's hum intensified. The ancient energy stirred to life. The final battle for the galaxy had begun. The final stand. The starcore chamber crackled with raw energy. Its crystalline surface shimmered with pulses of blue and white light, casting sharp shadows across the obsidian floor. Jake Carter lay sprawled on the cold stone, his body aching from the blast that had narrowly missed him. Princess Syria lay beside him, pale and weak. The soul link between them pulsed erratically, like a heart on the verge of collapse. Across the chamber, Lord Kale stood beside the starcore, holding the blood-red ceremonial dagger. The Cathar general loomed nearby, plasma cannon humming as it tracked Jake's movements. "You're persistent, Earthman," Kale said, voice cold. "But persistence won't save you now." He raised the dagger toward the starcore. "The blood command requires sacrifice. Syria's royal blood will complete the activation." Jake's pulse spiked. His eyes locked on the dagger. Through the soul link, he felt Syria's dread like icy needles through his chest. "We can't let him finish," Syria whispered, voice trembling. Jake pushed himself to his knees. What happens if he does? The starcore will shift from defense mode to annihilation mode, Syria said. The Cathar will gain control of our planetary defenses and turn them against us. Alari Prime will fall within minutes. Jake's mind raced. The Cathar were using Kale to bypass the starcore's security. The moment he completed the ritual, the core would belong to them, and Earth would be next. Kale smiled thinly. Don't bother whispering, Princess. I can hear your fear. He stepped closer to the starcore. The crystalline orb's glow intensified. The Cathar general barked a command in its guttural language. The door behind Jake sealed shut with a hiss. Trapped. Jake scanned the chamber. No cover, no escape. The only weapon he had was the soul link and his growing bond with Syria. He grabbed her hand. Can we stop him using the link? Syria's eyes fluttered. The link connects us. If we focus together, we might overload the starcore. But it's risky. If we push too hard, the energy backlash could kill us. Jake squeezed her hand. We don't have a choice. The starcore pulsed brighter as Kale raised the dagger above his head. By royal blood, by the ancient bond, I command the core to awaken, he intoned. He slashed the blade across his palm, letting crimson droplets splash onto the starcore. The crystal absorbed the blood, turning from blue to deep, glowing red. The Cathar general let out a guttural laugh. The walls trembled as the starcore's energy surged. Jake and Syria knelt across from Kale, hands intertwined. Focus, Syria whispered. Feel the bond. Jake closed his eyes and concentrated. The soul link bracelet on his wrist grew hotter. A spark of energy surged through their connection. Suddenly, his mind was no longer his alone. Memories flooded in. Syria as a child, standing on a balcony beside her father, looking at the stars. The weight of the crown placed upon her head. The pain of betrayal when she discovered Kel's treachery. Syria gasped. I can see your thoughts too. Jake's own memories clicked into the bond. Earth's blue skies. His sister laughing as they flew kites in a park. The moment he was chosen as Earth's diplomat. His fear when the Cathar attacked the wedding. Their minds melded into one. The starcore reacted to their bond. Its glow shifted from red to violet, swirling with chaotic energy. Kale's eyes widened. No, Kale shouted, slamming his bloody hand against the core. It's mine. The Cathar general raised its plasma cannon and fired. The blast hurtled toward Jake. Syria screamed, and instinctively, Jake raised his hand. A shimmering blue shield erupted from the bracelet. The plasma bolt ricocheted off the shield and struck the general, blasting it into the far wall. Jake stared at his hand, breathing hard. We did that. The bond is evolving. Syria whispered. The soul link is tapping into the starcore's energy. Kale bared his teeth and lunged toward Syria with the dagger. Jake moved faster. He tackled Cal to the ground, the dagger skittering across the floor. Cal's face contorted with rage as he struck Jake's wounded side. Pain exploded through Jake's ribs. Kale rolled on top of him, wrapping his hands around Jake's throat. You don't belong here, human, Kale hissed. This is not your fight. Jake's vision darkened. His muscles weakened. The soul link flared, and Syria's voice echoed in his mind. Focus on me. Trust the bond. Jake stopped struggling. He focused on Syria's presence in his mind, on the warmth of her resolve. Energy surged through his veins. The bracelet burned like molten metal. Blue lightning crackled along Jake's arms. He grabbed Cal's wrists and shoved him backward with a force that sent the traitor flying across the chamber. Syria staggered to her feet. The starcore vibrated, its color shifting wildly between blue, red, and violet. We need to shut it down, she said. The blood sacrifice is partially complete. If we don't stop it now, the Cathar fleet will seize control remotely. Jake rushed to her side. How do we stop it? Syria's fingers brushed the core's surface. Symbols shifted across the crystal. "We need to reverse the command sequence." Jake saw the symbols as if he'd known them his entire life. The bond was showing him the ancient language through Syria's eyes. Together, they began tracing patterns on the core's surface, speaking in unison. "By the bond of life, by the unity of will, revert the blood command." The starcore's surface cracked. A high-pitched whine filled the chamber. Energy lashed out, scorching the walls. Kale screamed from across the room. "You can't stop it. The blood has already been given." Jake turned to Syria. "Is he right?" "Not entirely," she said, voice shaking. "A stronger bond can override the command." "How?" Syria met his eyes. "If we fully merge through the soul link, we can become the core's new anchor. But it's dangerous. The energy might destroy us." Jake's chest tightened. "What happens if we don't?" "The starcore will fall to the Cathar, and both our worlds will burn." Jake didn't hesitate. He took her hands. "Let's do it." Their foreheads touched. The soul link surged, fusing their thoughts into a single stream of consciousness. The world around them vanished. They stood together in a vast, endless space filled with stars. The starcore floated before them, crackling with chaotic energy. Syria extended her hand toward the core. Jake mirrored her movement. Their hands met on the surface of the crystal. "Now," Syria said. They pushed their combined will into the core. Energy surged through them, a storm of heat and pressure. The bond stretched beyond pain, beyond fear. The starcore shuddered. The red veins within it turned brilliant blue. The chaotic pulses stabilized. Back in the physical chamber, Kale roared in frustration. He charged toward the core with the dagger raised high. Jake and Syria opened their eyes. With a final surge of will, they unleashed the soul link's full power. A wave of blue energy erupted from the core. It struck Kale mid-charge, vaporizing him in an instant. The Cathar general disintegrated in the blast. The energy wave expanded outward, racing through the planet's crust. Across Alari Prime, every Cathar warship and infiltrator device overloaded and exploded. The Cathar fleet orbiting the planet was obliterated in seconds. The core's glow dimmed. Jake and Syria collapsed to the ground. The bond between them settled into a soft, rhythmic hum. Jake opened his eyes and saw Syria lying beside him. Her chest rose and fell with shallow breaths. "It worked," Jake said, voice hoarse. Syria's eyes opened. A faint smile touched her lips. "We stopped them." The starcore now glowed a calm, steady blue. Its power was no longer a weapon, but a beacon of unity. Jake helped Syria to her feet. They turned toward the chamber entrance. The Cathar threat was over, but the galaxy had changed. As they stepped into the light, the soul link pulsed gently. They were no longer just allies, no longer just partners. They were one. And together, they had saved two worlds. The sacrifice and the truth. The sky above Alari Prime shifted from crimson to a deep, calming blue as the shockwave from the starcore's energy pulse dissipated. Across the planet, cities blinked back to life. The Cathar warships that had darkened the heavens were gone, shattered into debris or disabled beyond repair. The planetary defenses, once dormant, hummed with renewed strength. In the heart of the obsidian spire, Jake Carter leaned against the cold stone wall, his breath ragged. Princess Syria lay beside him, her eyes half closed, her face pale but peaceful. The soul link between them pulsed with a quiet, steady rhythm, like the shared heartbeat of two survivors who had walked through fire and lived. The starcore hovered silently in the center of the chamber, its crystalline surface glowing with soft blue light. It no longer radiated the chaotic energy that had nearly consumed them both. Instead, it thrummed with stability and purpose. The ancient machine had accepted their bond, replacing Cal's corrupted blood command with their unity. Jake squeezed Syria's hand. "We did it," he whispered. She opened her eyes and smiled weakly. We stopped the traitor. The starcore is safe. A dull ache settled in Jake's chest. The battle might have ended, but the cost was etched into every muscle and bone in his body. They had survived, but they were forever changed. The walls trembled slightly as hidden mechanisms within the spire shifted. A doorway appeared where there had been smooth stone moments before. Syria tensed. "They're coming," she said softly. "Who?" "The High Council. They would have felt the starcore's activation. Now they'll come to reclaim it." Jake straightened. "Good. We need allies." Syria's expression darkened. "Maybe. Or maybe they'll see what we did as a threat." The sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. Moments later, 6 figures in shimmering silver robes stepped into the chamber. Their faces were obscured by reflective visors, and glowing emblems floated above their palms. The central figure raised a hand. "Princess Syria." The voice was calm, yet edged with authority. "The starcore is awakened. Explain yourself." Syria pushed herself upright. Jake helped her to her feet. "The Cathar infiltrated our defenses," Syria said, voice steady despite her exhaustion. "They allied with Lord Kale to seize the starcore and destroy our planet. They would have obliterated Earth as well. We stopped them." The council members turned their reflective visors toward Jake. "You bonded with an offworlder," the leader said, voice disapproving. "That is forbidden." Jake stiffened. "Yeah, well, you're welcome. If we hadn't bonded, the Cathar would have turned your precious core into a planetary death ray." The council shifted slightly. A low hum passed between them, like an unspoken conversation. The leader tilted their head. "The bond is permanent." "Yes," Syria said. "The starcore accepted us. The bond is the only reason we survived." The council stood silent for a moment. Then the leader extended a hand toward the starcore. Energy swirled around their fingers, probing the core's surface. The crystal flared brighter under the contact, but the core did not respond to the council's touch. "It is locked," the leader said. "It will only respond to the bonded pair." Jake's stomach dropped. "Wait, are you saying we're the only ones who can control it now?" "Correct," the leader said. "The starcore has chosen you both as its anchors. You are now the guardians of the core." Jake exchanged a glance with Syria. Through the link, he felt her shock mirrored his own. The leader's voice grew colder. "This bond grants you access to the most powerful weapon in our history. That makes you both a threat." Jake's hand tightened around Syria's. "We didn't do this for power. We did it to stop a war." The council remained unmoved. The leader raised their hand, and energy rippled through the chamber. Plasma barriers flared around Jake and Syria, trapping them near the starcore. "Wait," Syria shouted. "You can't do this. You are too dangerous to be left free," the leader said. "The bond cannot be undone. Therefore, you must be contained." Jake's heart raced. The soul link flared with Syria's rising panic. The energy of the barriers pressed against his skin like static. "We need a plan," Jake said through clenched teeth. Syria closed her eyes, focusing. Jake felt her thoughts merge with his. The starcore pulsed in response. Energy gathered beneath their feet, rippling through the ancient structure. Syria's eyes snapped open. "On my signal, focus everything into the core." Jake gave a subtle nod. The council hadn't realized the true nature of their bond, or how deeply connected they were to the core's energy now. The leader stepped closer. "Surrender, or be destroyed." Syria raised her voice. "We will never surrender." The council lifted their hands, summoning plasma lances. "Now!" Syria screamed. Jake and Syria grasped the core simultaneously. The soul link blazed like wildfire. Blue lightning exploded from the core, shattering the barriers. The council members were hurled backward as energy flooded the chamber. The core's surface shifted beneath their hands, revealing a hidden command interface. Ancient symbols spiraled upward. Jake's mind absorbed the meaning instantly through the bond. "Evacuate. Transport. Lockdown. Transport us out of here," Syria said. Jake focused on the command symbol. The core responded. Light engulfed them. The next instant, they stood on a grassy hill beneath a pale sky. The cool wind carried the scent of rain and distant mountains. Jake turned in a circle. The landscape was unfamiliar but beautiful, rolling meadows and towering peaks. Syria dropped to her knees, breathing hard. Jake knelt beside her, scanning the horizon. "Where are we?" he asked. Syria placed a hand on the ground. "This is Sanctuary," she said, "a hidden world, created by the ancestors as a refuge for the starcore's guardians." Jake exhaled slowly. "So we're safe." "For now," Syria said. "But the council won't give up. The Cathar might be gone, but the hunger for power never dies." Jake sat back on his heels, exhaustion crashing over him. The sky shifted to twilight, twin moons rising above the mountains. The soul link hummed gently between them, a steady reminder of their shared burden. "So, we're stuck here," Jake said with a dry laugh. "Guardians of an ancient superweapon, hiding from an alien council and any other power-hungry faction that wants a planet killer." Syria leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "Sounds about right." Jake stared at the twin moons. "You know, when I signed up for the diplomatic corps, I thought the hardest part would be learning alien table manners." Syria smiled faintly. "Instead, you married an alien princess and stopped a war." "Yeah, life's weird like that." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the whisper of the wind. Jake turned to her. "The bond. It's permanent, isn't it?" Syria met his gaze. "Yes, our minds, our energy. It's all connected now. Forever." Jake processed that. The bond was no longer just a diplomatic trick. It was part of who he was now, woven into every thought and feeling. "Guess that means we better get along," he said. Syria laughed softly. "Yes, Jake Carter, I guess it does." Their hands touched. The soul link pulsed, not with urgency or fear, but with a quiet warmth. High above, the starcore's faint energy shimmered like a distant star, an ancient power, now guarded by two souls bound beyond words. They had stopped a war, saved two worlds, and in doing so, become something more than human or Alari. They had become legends.